The roast was dry. The wine was tepid. My father's voice droned on like it always did when he felt he was imparting wisdom, flat, loud, and built on disappointment. "I'm not saying you haven't tried Seren," he said, folding his napkin with deliberate finality. "But there comes a time when you need to stop chasing fantasy and join the real world." He reached into the leather folio beside his plate and pulled out a sheet of paper, sliding it across the long mahogany table, like a final judgment. "Local firm in Stamford, junior tech analyst, full benefits. You could start next month." Lysandra let out a breathy little laugh, trying to stifle it behind her wine glass. She never tried that hard to hide it. Her husband Corwin leaned forward, eager to add his 2 cents, but my mother placed a gentle hand on his wrist and shook her head. Even she could sense the tension humming beneath the surface. I didn't touch the paper. I didn't need to. I already knew the type cubicle fluorescent lighting quarterly reviews about team synergy, the kind of job they understood, the kind they respected, the kind I walked away from a lifetime ago. I reached for my wine. Then the television behind Lysandra flickered. No one paid attention. At first it had been running some muted finance talk show while we ate, but the red banner that stretched across the bottom of the screen was impossible to miss. Breaking mystery billionaire tech investor finally unmasked Corwin was the first to notice. He turned in his chair. Then my mother. My father was mid-sentence. Something about retirement accounts when the anchor's voice cut through the room. Sources confirm the figure behind Polaris Holdings, and the Mars Fusion Uplink initiative is 35-year-old Seren Alcott. There was a pause, a click of glass on glass, a fork slipping from Lysandra's hand, and silence. My photo filled the screen, a press image from last year's Geneva summit. Black blazer, arms folded, standing in front of the mock-up for the lunar tether array. I set down my fork, carefully placed my napkin over my lap, and met my father's stunned gaze. "I wasn't going to bring this up tonight," I said quietly, "but since we're all caught up..." The light in Polaris HQ was different, brighter, sharper, intentional. A high-gloss sheen over every surface glass and carbon composites, bending the morning sun into something almost operatic. I stood at the head of the strategy deck, the central projection screen, pulsing with telemetry from the Mars array. Real-time data shimmered behind me like starlight. "Phase alignment is within tolerance," I said, pointing with my stylus. "If we hold uplink frequency through the fusion cycle, we can initiate quantum pairing within 36 hours. After that, gravitational skip lunar relay and clean contact with Surface Echo 1. Around the table, they nodded NASA advisors, European Space Council liaisons, the orbital dynamics lead from the UAE. 10 nations, 1 table. I ran it all under a name none of them knew wasn't real. "Any risk on magnetic flux deviation?" asked Lieutenant Commander Abrams from Defense Liaison. "Less than 0.5%, I replied. "But we'll rerun diagnostics through the Argus simulator tonight to be safe." Jai Mehra, my COO, didn't look up from his tablet, but his hand slid something discreetly across the surface toward me. My phone, locked, buzzing, again. He raised an eyebrow. I pressed my thumb to unlock it. The message was from Orion, my younger brother. "Family dinner tomorrow. Mandatory. Mom says it's important. Don't flake." I stared at the text longer than I needed to. Jai leaned closer, voice low. "Want me to intercept fake a commitment in Oslo?" I shook my head. "No, I'll handle it. One last time." He didn't argue. Just returned to the task board like it was any other morning, and for everyone else it was. For me, it was a countdown. I dismissed the room 5 minutes early, citing atmospheric modeling. They filed out, murmuring respectful. None of them suspected their boss had to go home and pretend to be unemployed, pretend to be lost, pretend not to be the woman about to change planetary physics from a building they used to laugh at. Later that night, I packed light and locked the case with my thumbprint. I chose clothes that didn't fit. shoes that scuffed, and I left the penthouse as Seren Alcott unknown again, fading back into the silhouette they preferred. Halfway up the Taconic, I pulled off into a rest stop and parked under the shadow of a shuttered gas station. I checked my mirrors, then reached into the duffel on the passenger seat. The blazer and pressed trousers I wore to brief international aerospace delegates were folded neatly at the bottom. I wouldn't need them where I was going. I slipped on the hoodie, faded navy, 2 sizes too big. Then the jeans. They still smelled faintly of the thrift shop where I bought them last year for moments like this. I tied my hair into a loose, lazy knot and opened the tiny tin of blackened machine grease I kept in the glove box. 1 dab between my fingers, then rubbed onto my knuckles. Just enough to say I tinker not, I engineer the future. I looked at myself in the visor mirror. Unremarkable. Slightly disheveled. 1 step from being dismissed entirely. Perfect. By the time I turned into the long gravel driveway of the Alcott estate, I was someone else again. The version of me they were most comfortable keeping underwhelmed. The garage door was open, 2 Teslas plugged into the wall, lawn perfectly combed. American success staged with surgical precision. Inez opened the door before I could knock. She looked tired. "They're in the study," she said, dropping her voice. "They've got binders, resums. There's even a projection screen set up. Let me guess," I said, stepping inside. Fonts in all caps, slides named Plan A through Z, color-coded, she said. "And there's coffee. But it's not for you. It's for the guests." I paused. Guests. They're friends from the law firm, a recruiter, and someone who works in municipal IT. Inez's mouth pulled into something between pity and warning. In the grand study, I saw it all waiting, my father already standing near the screen, hands folded behind his back like he was about to open court. My mother flipping through a packet. My sister Lysandra sipping wine with practiced disapproval. A PowerPoint file was paused on the screen, Operation Serene's Life Reboot. My name in bold Arial underlined in red. I took 1 slow breath and stepped inside. 10 years ago, I stood in a smaller version of that same study, holding a rolled-up draft of the first propulsion architecture I ever designed. It was rough hand-marked in the margins with equations I couldn't stop refining even on the train ride over. I had printed it at MIT's lab printer at 3 a.m., too wired to sleep, too excited to wait. I thought they'd be proud, my father especially. After all, he co-founded a firm that represented patent holders and tech innovators. It made sense to bring it to him first. He read the first 2 pages and chuckled. "You're trying to override Newtonian constraints with this?" he asked. "Yes," I said, breath caught in my chest. "If we decouple the inertial base at launch and realign..." He waved a hand. "Seren. You're thinking like a theorist. This isn't viable tech. It's a term paper." My mother said nothing. She adjusted a flower vase on the console behind the couch. Lysandra wasn't even home. 2 weeks later, I found out through a friend at Cal West Robotics that a rival firm had submitted a similar draft, an inferior one. Sloppy execution. They couldn't get the math to stabilize in simulation, let alone in practice. But the format, the illustrations, the phrasing, they were mine. I never confronted him. What would have been the point? Instead, I left MIT. I didn't drop out. I ghosted. Removed myself from every system, revoked. Access wiped accounts. Shut down my thesis. Submission the night before it was due. Then I started something else. Through aliases and shell firms, I bought controlling interest in a small orbital sensor company. Then another in data logistics. I filed patents under a dead ant's name, pitched designs using voice-cloaked presentations, built momentum the way black holes build gravity invisibly relentlessly. They forgot about me, and I let them, but I remembered everything. And as I stood in the study, now watching my father clear his throat to begin a slideshow about career stability, I thought about that propulsion draft, how they laughed, and how it was now being used in Polaris's Mars deployment array. No one moved. The television still glowed behind Lysandra, casting a cold blue light across the untouched plates. My father's hand hovered mid-air, still holding the job posting he'd slid toward me. My mother's lips were slightly parted, as if she were about to speak but hadn't found the words yet. And Lysandra just blinked at me like I'd become someone else mid-sentence. "You lied to us," she finally said. I folded my napkin and set it beside my wine glass. "No," I replied evenly. "You never asked." Corwin cleared his throat, but whatever he meant to add evaporated under the weight of the silence. I reached into my bag and retrieved a black leather folder. Its click echoed across the table like a starter pistol. I opened it and slid a stack of printed documents across the table. "If you want to keep talking about this," I said, "you'll need to sign. Non-disclosure agreements. Standard clause. No media. No internal sharing." My father finally found his voice. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," I said, still calm. "These are Class S confidentiality agreements, cross-referenced through Polaris Holdings Intelligence Division." He glanced down at the words printed in bold across the top, level S. Redacted Corporate Asset Protocol. "What exactly is it you think you've built?" my mother asked, voice tight. I looked at her. "I don't think." "I know. I fund 3 space agencies through encrypted intermediaries. I own 70% of the satellite communication systems for Mars operations. I have equity in the fusion uplink powering the next stage of atmospheric terraforming." Lysandra exhaled sharply. "You're making this up." I tilted my head slightly. "Google it." But no one reached for their phone. I leaned back. "I didn't need your belief. I needed your absence. You gave me that. And in that silence, I built something so far beyond what you ever imagined for me that now you can't even recognize it." I watched my father stare at the documents, his mouth tight. I poured myself a fresh glass of wine and raised it just slightly like a private toast to no one. Then I reached for my bag and took out the final file. The city buzzed beneath me as I stood at the edge of the glass wall in my office, watching the light smear across the Hudson like data streams. By the time I arrived back at Polaris HQ, the dinner was already being dissected by everyone except the ones who mattered. I pressed the intercom. "Natalia, initiate ghost protocol." Within seconds, she was at my door tablet in hand, dark suit, impeccable as always. "We're ready," she said. "The shell companies are in place. Vanguard, Theta, and Orbit Ledger will handle the Delaware routes. Initial bids are already shadowing the non-controlling shares." I nodded, letting that sink in. She tapped the screen. "Alcott and Reeves has lost 3 major clients in the past 2 quarters. Their digital compliance is 2 versions out of date. They haven't adopted AI-based intake since 2019. And..." She hesitated. "We found something else." I turned from the window. "Go on." "One of their partners, Lyndon Beck, archived your propulsion submission. Never filed it. He logged a note that it was too speculative and might damage firm reputation if associated publicly. I didn't speak." She added, 4 months later, he pitched a similar outline, reworked to NovaForge legal tech. It failed in court during cross-disciplinary patent validation, but it's a match to your structure, almost word for word. I sat down slowly and stared at the tablet she slid across the desk. The comparison was clear. Same equations, same margin notes, even a stray typo I remembered from my sleepless night formatting the draft. I handed it back. "This isn't revenge," I said quietly. "It's succession, just not the kind they wanted." Natalia raised an eyebrow. "You want to move on the senior class now, begin soft acquisition, avoid triggering alerts. I want majority control before anyone notices I'm in the room." She nodded once and left. I turned back to the window, the skyline blinking like a server bank warming up for something bigger, something irreversible. Then I opened the case file on my desk and began reviewing the active partners' voting shares. Rain clung to the sides of the building like it wanted to peel the name off the glass. Alcott and Reeves LLP shimmered above me in silver letters, the same ones I used to stare at from a subway bench 10 years ago, too broke for coffee, too proud to go home. I stepped out of the car without an umbrella. The white suit I wore cut clean through the storm hair, slicked back heels, echoing across the lobby tile. The receptionist faltered when she saw me, then stood quickly. "Miss Alcott," she began. "My team's already upstairs," I said. "Boardroom." The elevator hummed quietly, stopping at the top floor without interruption. As the doors opened, the hallway beyond was already thick with tension. I could feel it. The scent of espresso and control, familiar but no longer intimidating. Natalia waited just outside the boardroom doors with a single folder in hand. She nodded, then stepped aside. I pushed the doors open. 12 partners sat inside, still in their morning routines, Ty's crooked eyes scanning digital agendas. My father stood at the head of the table just like always, but he wasn't leading. Not today. "Seren," he said. Not a greeting, a challenge. I said nothing. Natalia stepped in behind me and placed the documents on the table. As of 9:03 this morning, she announced Miss Alcott holds 52% controlling interest in Alcott and Reeves. Effective immediately, she has the authority to initiate executive restructuring, leadership reassignment, and legal asset absorption. There was a full 5 seconds of silence before voices erupted. Demands for counsel, questions, raised hands like we were in some mock courtroom. My father stared at me, jaw tight. "This is legacy," he snapped. "You don't just walk in here and claim it." I met his gaze. "No," I said. "This isn't legacy. This is leverage." His face turned crimson. I walked to the center of the table and placed my own copy of the transition framework in front of him. Then I looked around the room at the men who once laughed me out of consideration and said nothing more. I didn't need to. The weight of the folder said it all. The invitation was simple. A text. No explanation. Just the name of the restaurant they always joked about like it was a myth Polaris. For years they'd mentioned it in passing. My mother once called it obnoxiously modern. My father said it's the kind of place where they serve food that looks like art but tastes like air. Lysandra tried to get a reservation once and failed. 3-year wait list, she'd said. Smug, like she was fine with it. I booked the entire place. When they arrived, the staff greeted them with restrained formality. They were escorted through a hallway of soft blue light and suspended glass columns that shimmered like starlight. The private dining chamber was oval-shaped, wrapped in 270 degrees of Manhattan skyline. The lighting shifted subtly every few minutes, reacting to body language and vocal tone. They looked stunned. My mother ran her hand across the table's matte finish. My father examined the light fixtures like they were suspicious. "This place is unreal," Lysandra said, not quite seated. "How did you even get in here?" "I didn't," I said, pouring wine into my own glass. "I built it." They froze. I designed the energy grid, the AI-curated menu, the environmental tone mapping, every element. I let that settle as the first course arrived without menus, personalized for each of them based on their biometric scans at the entrance. No one touched the food at first. Halfway through the second course, a door opened near the back of the room, and a woman in black approached with a camera crew. "Forbes," she said politely. "We're here for the Empire Edition cover. Family photo." No one said a word, not even Corwin. I leaned back in my chair, lifted my glass, and sipped slowly. "You said family only," I said, watching them. Now the world gets to see what that really means. They didn't smile, but they stood. Because even if they didn't know what part they played anymore, they understood something had shifted and the lens was already focused. The morning after Polaris, the headlines were all polished awe. The billionaire daughter no one saw coming. Empire architect Seren Alcott and her family reunite at rooftop power dinner. Photos of us posed smiling, impeccably lit, circulated everywhere. You'd think we were a dynasty reborn. Behind the scenes, it was quieter and colder. Lysandra posted a filtered shot of her wine glass against the skyline. The caption read, "Trust takes time to rebuild." She didn't tag me. Corwin sent a group message thanking me for the meal, then added a comment about how maybe it's time we all realign. He attached a PDF of his resume. I ignored both. Later that afternoon, I met my mother in the conservatory behind the estate. It still smelled faintly of lavender and old furniture polish. She sat on the edge of the wicker love seat, hands folded over her knee back straight, like she'd practiced what she needed to say. "I always believed you were bright," she said after a long pause. "But this, all of it, it's staggering." I waited. She looked at me differently now, not with softness, but with calculation. The way people look at something valuable once they realize they never quite understood its worth. "I want to ask you something," she said quietly. "Why didn't you let us in? When it started to work, when you began building all this, why didn't you call?" I didn't hesitate. "Because you didn't ask what I was building. You asked why I wasn't normal. You weren't listening to grow closer. You were listening to correct." She flinched just barely, but didn't deny it. "I didn't keep it from you to punish you," I added. "I kept it because I needed peace to finish it." We sat in silence, the kind that says too much. She didn't apologize. I didn't expect her to. When I stood to leave, she didn't follow. I walked through the garden past the hydrangeas I once helped her plant and back to the car waiting near the gravel loop. My phone buzzed as I reached for the door, one final message I had been expecting. The city stretched out beneath me like a coded grid, neat, pulsing alive with systems I'd long since learned to read and rewire. Morning sun spilled through the penthouse windows, catching the corner of the table where my inbox glowed. The first alert came from Geneva Nobel Physics, nomination submitted confidential until fall announcements. The second was more ironic, a polite inquiry from Nova Forge, the firm that once published a LinkedIn article mocking my early propulsion model. They were now interested in a buyout conversation, phrasing it as a strategic opportunity for mutual synergy. I flagged the message, forwarded it to Jai with one word decline. 3 more notifications followed, honorary degree offers from institutions that hadn't even replied to my grant proposals a decade ago. One had rejected me twice for a research assistantship. Now they wanted me to headline their centennial gala. I closed the window with a flick of my hand. This wasn't revenge. This was the real work rising to meet its reflection. All of it. Not earned from their validation, but sharpened by their absence. "Legacy isn't what you inherit," I murmured. "It's what you construct." Quietly, precisely. On your own terms. Another ping. A secure relay from our mission console. Quantum rover relay confirmed. Mars uplink stable. Data packets aligned across dual hemispheres. I read it twice, then leaned back into the stillness of the room. It wasn't quiet, not really. There was always something humming, something just launched, or just discovered, or just about to break free from gravity. I took a breath and let the silence fold around it. Everything had moved. Everyone had seen. I didn't need the family name. I had something better. The stars aren't dreams anymore. They're deliverables.